Hey folks, Russ Bailey here with BrushPile Fishing. It's time for another video podcast. No matter whether you're getting this podcast on our app or Facebook page or wherever you get your podcasts, I guess we're everywhere now. We're on Apple and Spotify, and I don't know all those places, but I'm not real advanced on that, but our media guys are, so I'm glad you're joining us today. We're actually coming to you from our media camp down here in Dale Hollow. And the man to my right, Mr. Jeff Smith from Crappie Magnet. Jeff, how we doing today?
Good, Russ. How are you, bud?
Pretty good, man. You know, as luck has it, okay, we come down to do this media camp.
Yeah.
And we were going to actually shoot a show yesterday. The day before the camp, it was 75 and sunny, no wind. The day the camp started, it was cold, it was windy, it rained. We have brand new video equipment. We ran into some issues.
Yeah.
So you know how it goes.
I know how it goes. Yeah, it's exactly right. And it's, I mean, crappie in particular, man, it doesn't take much to shut them down.
Yep.
And I think Corey was a little bit, Corey Thomas was a little bit frustrated because he fished out here all the time, really doesn't struggle to catch crappie a lot of times. And
tough.
yesterday was a humbling experience for a lot of the fishermen out here. So, yeah, it's just one of those deals.
It is.
But you know what? You know, people always say that, and I got to tell you, with my son in particular, I always waited to the perfect time to take him when they were biting, and he didn't like fishing that much. It wasn't until I realized it had to have the days you didn't catch him to get hungry.
That's how you appreciate the good days.
And you appreciate it, but you also see that it's, you know, not everybody just can go out here and catch a fish. It takes, the right equipment is at the top of that list.
Yep.
Preparation is humongo.
Yep.
I always tell people, most days I can tell you how many fish we're going to catch before we leave, because I've looked at the weather, I've looked at the water, I've been on the water, and that preparation and equipment prepares me for the last part, which is just the presentation of it.
Sure.
And then when you put those three things together, then you have a successful fisherman. The best fishermen are overthinking all three of those things. Every one of them. They're almost annoyingly watching their equipment, annoyingly watching the weather, right? You know, it's just constant. And then the technique. Better watch out, because if you're not doing it right, you know, you can tell you're not doing it exactly.
Oh, you got her.
And those best fishermen are so in tune to the details of those three things that they pass everybody else up.
Yep. And you know, we were talking off camera just now. We talked about Lane, his son, is down here, and he has been fishing for trout, and he caught an absolute monster yesterday. And I got to talk to Lane and we're going to talk, Jeff's got some new products on the market, and we're working on some things, especially you northern anglers like myself. I can't say a whole lot, but you're going to love it. But I actually got some of the samples sent to me by Jeff a couple months ago, and I got to go out and try these things. And Jeff told me that Lane actually helped make these and stuff and got them to me. And so yesterday when I seen Lane, and how old's Lane?
Lane just turned 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I said, Lane, I said, hey, I want to appreciate those baits. And I said, I got to use them. And he said, well, you only got a couple, right? I said, yeah. I said, but I use them. And I said, buddy, they work. And he said, man, he said, I'm sorry. He says, I'd like to make you some more. He said, but I've got school and stuff right now. So I thought, man, that's cool. He said, but soon school's out. He said, you let me know what colors you want. But what do we got new on the market?
Well, I've got a bunch of new things that are coming out in the future. Right now, we've got just a handful of new stuff that's colors and those types of things on the current baits that we have. And then I'll talk a little bit about the future things coming out too. But the newest bait we've got out right now is the Dancer. And I'm not sure if you fished it a whole lot.
Fished it yesterday.
Okay. And the idea with this is just a finesse tail, right? And so basically it's a small miniature paddle tail.
Okay.
Inch and a half to inch and 3/4, pushing 2 inches. But it's really tiny. Live scopers are using this because you can control it a little bit better, and it doesn't take a whole lot of water to move it. That's coming out on a whole lot more new colors now that we've seen the success of that bait. That's definitely one of the hot things coming out.
And on that, little bragging right here, before those were actually out on the market, Kent Driscoll and I did a show last year that hasn't aired yet. It's going to air this year. And the last thing before that show was over, he said, hey, have you seen these? They're coming out here soon. And we threw a couple on. And bam, caught fish.
Good,
so I think
good.
We're the first one that's going to have video
cool.
of those being.
That's cool. And I tell you, probably where you use that's probably why we made this bait. Obviously, white and black crappie will hit this bait you know, they'll both hit it. But the black crappie in particular like those small profile baits.
Okay.
And I bet you were fishing a black lake type of.
We were.
Yeah, and those black crappie just, you know, a crappie magnet is probably the ugliest bait we got. It really is. There's nothing about it that makes you go, huh, that's just a great, it's just not. But there's something about that split tail, the way it looks, the shape of it, the black crappie in particular love it.
Jeff,
So,
I think me and you've talked about this before, but I'm going to tell the folks at home. So when you and our company got together, okay, Marcus actually called me and said, hey, we've got a company, we want you to try some of the products and stuff. And I've been honest with you before. I looked at the regular double tail crappie magnet, and I told Marcus, man, don't do anything right now. Let me go try these, because I thought,
yeah,
man, I don't know. And that
it doesn't
that
look
double
like
tail,
anything.
awesome.
It
and
doesn't
I
look.
have fish from Florida to you name it,
Yeah.
it catches fish.
Well, here's the thing. Let's go back to what I said earlier about the details, right? Well, what happened was the original lure that we made is a trout magnet, right? This is a trout bait, but it's got a split tail and it falls flat with a shad dart head. It's got a really unique look. So back in the early 2000s, that bait was doing so well that the largest retailer in the world came to me and said, can you make it in a crappie bait? And I said, what? That doesn't make any, you know, I was weird because we're always trying to make new stuff and they're asking us to make. I'm like, well, yeah, right, let's do this. Well, I didn't have the details, right, on how to make a good crappie bait. So I made a split tail grub that was a little bit smaller than this one. Excuse me. It didn't work. And it doesn't look much different than that. Isn't it? It's crazy, the details, right? So I made this bait, and so we literally failed at it. I sold it, and they stopped ordering it. And so I'm like, what are we going to do? The trout magnet was still going great. The crappie bait now is falling apart on us. I'm like, well, I guess that wasn't supposed to be, right? Well, I'm not a crappie fisherman at that time. Now we love it. You know, it's 15 years ago. And so I was sitting at home one day, and I get a call. And the call was from a guy I'd never met before. And at the time, I don't even know if I'd heard his name, but if I'd been in the crappie world, I would have. His name is Dude Maddox.
Yep.
Dude Maddox called, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, this is the next to nearest nothing I've ever seen. He said, but I've got it where I catch fish on it better than anything else I got. I said, you got my ear, right? And so I said, when can I come and see you? So I went to Nashville, Tennessee. We sat down. He said, here's your problem. And I was like, really, is it that easy? He goes, yeah. And a lot of it was the tail. If you look at a lot of split tails, when they sit together, they'll be like that. This bait in the mold is now made like that.
Yeah.
So when it goes to the water, it relaxes open, like this. We had to make the barrel a little bit bigger with ridges. The ridges completely changed it as well. Whatever it did, it turned the crappie on like crazy. And so I started going with him. We started making this thing. We made it exactly the way he wanted it, made prototypes. Before you knew it, we had it. And you're talking about something, if I showed you the two, to the average fisherman, oh, that's pretty much the same lure.
Yeah.
But it was not, and how it looked in the water was not. So this has a lot of thought into it, even though it really doesn't look like it. But it is the bait that if you're going to try some of our stuff, always start with a crappie magnet, because there's something about that bait, and especially if you're fishing for black crappie, it's just a great bait. And we got a couple new colors in it. There's one color that's not here. This is that new Isom color, which is basically a Cajun cricket front with a chartreuse tail. For some reason, in stained water, that's been an absolute killer this year for me and a lot of people around the country. What other questions you got? Well, we have a ton of baits though too, right? We have this one right here to become really popular, the fin spin, which is the reason this came about was because we were spider rigging a lot at the time, and I wanted something I could push really slow and still make that blade turn.
Get that vibration.
That's right. And so most underspins, 0.4, 0.5 is what it'll take to get that blade spinning. So what we did is we started going, what would make it spin slower? And so we started playing with different blades, different sizes, and then what came about was the trout magnet has a shad dart head. I'm like, what if we put a shad dart head and trying this thing? Well, when we did, that's when everything changed, because it pushes the water to the blade. And now this thing, this little willow blade, set up the way we had it and the angle we had this, started turning at 0.3.
Yeah.
Now, is that important? Sometimes not, but sometimes very much so. Because I can slow roll it. I can cast it and slow it down. Pulling it behind the boat, I can change speeds and know that the blade's always going to turn. But it also created a little bit of a vibration because of the way the water catches the front of that jig. So it comes through with a little bit of a wiggle too. Either way, this has become a really big product for us. And then, because of Les Smith and a lot of the Mississippi people, we started adding tails to it.
And right here.
Yeah, that's the craziest thing
right
ever.
here.
I'm telling you, that's the craziest thing. I really, when he told me he was catching them on there, I really didn't think he knew what he was talking about. This is years ago before I knew Corey. And I'm like, in a super clear lake, you're catching them on a bait that I made for stained water.
And that's the color.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the thing, too. Some of the colors that we were making obviously don't work here. But the blues and the blacks and, you know, the colors that are a little bit more natural are definitely working. And so now you look 15 years later at all the different products we have. Very proud of the slab bites. That was a labor of love right there, because I knew I wanted to make something that was, you know, there's some good products on the market for scent added to your baits, but I wanted something that did something, a couple different things. One, stayed on the hook better. Two, didn't get all over you. And three, floated, because it would actually make the bait a little bit more buoyant. And so this right here is made right here in America. It's a great product. You know, you can stomp it into your carpet. It won't get all over it or your shirt, except the glitter. Watch it. But anyways, that right there is a product we're really proud of as well. So we have a wide variety of stuff, and most of it's because we've partnered with different people that do different things very, very well.
And what I like about the Crappie Magnet products, so we talk about, we're down here at Dale Hollow right now. One of the easiest way to catch the fish here is long lining. Right there is your bait. You don't need anything else. Bring different colors because it can change, but 90% of the time, that's your color. We talked about just the regular Crappie Magnet. I'm not sure if you've seen it, Jeff, but we were in Florida last month taping, and we were on Lake Jessup, and we were down there throwing regular Crappie Magnets, and it was unbelievable. And the thing that I like about the regular Crappie Magnets, I can fish those vertical jigging, pitching to fish, or under a cork. Under a cork, it is absolute dynamite, because when I'm fishing under a cork, I'm controlling the movement of that jig. And what we've seen, and we were in a cold front there, so I want to slow down the presentation. And what I'm seeing down there is when we would pop that cork, and I just barely pop it, it may only raise that jig this much, and then it settles.
As soon as it stops, doesn't it?
Because you'll see, I've got to do these seminars in clear tanks, and when they're locked up like that, you'll see in position when you pop it that much, then they'll hold. Well, then when them tails sit there and just quiver by themselves, they'll come up and mouth it. And we would see that cork not even going under, just turning. It's a great finesse bait. We did a Facebook Live video there. We found a broken down dock. And you always hear every cast. It was every cast.
I saw that video. That was
Every single
incredible.
cast. And fans, you gave us 100,000 views in 24 hours on that. And it's funny because one of the guides, that's a buddy of mine down there, he called me one day. He said, "Man, don't ever do a Facebook Live here again." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Russ," he said, "I'm not kidding you." He said, "If it's daylight," he said, "since you did that video," he said, "you cannot go on our lake and not see someone on that dock." I said, "Get out of it." And that mermaid, you know, we talk about colors. That's another thing I like about Crappie Magnet. We all have our favorite colors. I mean, we do, but there's so much to choose from. And I've really expanded because I did a show with Kevin McCarley, and Kevin was using Dude. We were spider rigging, and that's the only color he had on. I said, "Man, you don't want to mix it." He said, "No need to." And
he knew, huh? He knew.
And I'm a guy that would have never, ever had that color in my tackle box. And now I've used it several places.
That's a good color. Yeah, you bet. You know, and Live Scope has changed a few things, but when I fish with Dude, the color that's named after, he's proved to me so many times how a crappie will change really what he feeds on throughout the day, colors in particular. Now, Live Scope's made it where we're going to put it on their nose and see if they want it or not. Where without that, they've got to move to it. They've got to see the color. They've got to respond to it. So, you know, with him, man, it was always changing, and he would be 2 steps ahead of me, and he's tried 6 colors, and now they're on that color when they won't even hit the color they were on in the morning. And I never would have done that before. Then we got to spider rigging, and then we really learned it, right? Well, that's the only color that they're hitting. They're all the same poles. So those that say that color doesn't matter, there's sometimes color doesn't matter, but there's a lot of times it's super significant. And you don't know why. I mean, why are the crappie seeing those things the way they do, and why would they eat a bait that really doesn't look much like a fish that they would feed on? I don't know. You know, he said something a little bit ago that's interesting. In the Crappie Magnet, how it sits under that float. That's what Dude and I were working on when I was over there. And so a lot of baits on the market, even if you were to fish that under a float, it would not fish properly because the way the plastic is made and the way the body is, it wouldn't sit horizontal.
Right.
It would probably sit up or down based on the shape of the body.
Yep.
Where the crappie magnet, typically, even if you don't tie a loop nut on, is going to sit like this. Well, what does that look like? Any bait in the water.
Natural.
And so if you're using a bait and you look down there on the float and that thing is sitting like this or like this, that's a no-win deal right there. Either change the way your knot's on, slide the line back around, do something to get that lure to sit like that. Where the crappie magnet, for the most part, because of the way it's designed in the tail, it'll pendulum and be like that, unless that's a really big, heavy jig head. Then it'll start leaning head first. But that's super significant, you know, and why that bait works, and a lot of baits work. There's a lot of really good baits on the market. You'll notice some work better under floats than others. That's the reason how they look.
Yep. Now, before we get on the kits, the one thing I do want to talk about, we don't have here, but I'm sure Joe can find some video, but we were, and especially us northern anglers in my area too, they are so afraid to use big baits, okay? And Joe and I, we went to tape a show a couple years ago in Wisconsin. It was late fall, it was rainy, it was cold, and I mean cold. We go up to Wisconsin and almost on the Canadian border. And when we met the guide that we were taping with, we had a surprise thrown on us. He told us, great guy, but he told us, he says, hey, he says, I just want to be up front with you. He said, I'm a walleye guide. He said, I don't crappie fish.
Ah, you drove all the way up here to go fish with somebody?
It's like we just drove 600-700 miles, you know, and I said, okay, I said, what's your water temperature here? So he tells me, and I said, do you have any structure in about 10 to 15 foot of water? He said, we do. I said, can we go try that? So we get out on the water, and he's got 12-pound test line,
Ooh,
big slip bobber, and just a minnow hook, because that's what he walleye fishes with. So I love, even during cold fronts, I love starting with big baits when I tournament fish. I did that. If I had to downsize, I would. But I started with the slab magnet, and that's a big bait. And I was fishing off the bottom on the structure with that, and he's got his minnow rig over there, and I start wearing them out on the
really?
show. And he keeps looking over, and he says, what are you using? I said, just this plastic here. And I said, it's called a slab magnet. He said, are you tipping it? I said, no. And so,
you know, it's interesting. The northern people don't understand it. Because I grew up in the north, right?
Yep.
And a minnow, you'd catch a few crappies, but it was never something you targeted. Right, and so that I know exactly what he was saying. Kind of shocked, like, really, it's that easy? You just did that?
And that's
right?
what he said. He said, I can't believe it. I was using my signature series rod.
Ah, cool, yeah.
So by the end of the show, he had switched over. I gave him a rod, and he was using those, and we had an absolute blast. And he had called me a while back, and he said, hey, he said, just want you know, he said, I ordered 8 of them rods. He said, I'm chasing crappie now. And he said, I'm guiding for crappie now.
That's awesome.
And that's what I'm saying. Even I wish my buddies would get used to trying some of these bigger baits. We were in Mississippi with Mike Ellis.
Oh, okay.
And we shot a show 2 weeks ago. And those fish, we had a cold front in the morning. Now it warmed up. But same thing, slab magnets, 4 foot of water.
That's neat.
But what about the kits?
Well, the kits are items that we make to make it a little bit easier for people to get a good sampling of what we make. This one here is just the best of the crappie magnet. You got your mermaid in there, and it's got a lot of different colors. It's got our float and jig heads, so it's just called the best of best crappie magnet kit. And it's really a good little box. I mean, it's a little tackle box. You know, you one-stop shop, get you everything you need there. And I brought this up here because the panfish magnet is really man. If there's one bait Lane and I will carry with us when we travel, that's it.
Yeah.
This will catch everything that swims.
Yeah.
I've caught everything, and it's been such a popular bait for us, but it works. It's just a small little grub with a shad dart head, a 64th ounce head. So you got to have 4-pound test or smaller. We fish 2-pound a lot. That box right there is just absolutely. I mean, that's caught more fish than anything I have probably. And in fact, there's. Field and Stream did an article on the trout magnet / panfish magnet. It's the same lure. Several years ago, listing as one of the top lures of all time.
Really?
And I didn't know that company. I didn't know anybody there or the writer. So I'm like, I got to find out, how does this become, right? It's listed with all these great lures. And I called the guy up, and he said, we were inundated with information about this lure. So my whole staff started fishing with it because of what we were hearing, what it would do to bluegill. And I'm like, yes, it'll kill the bluegill as well as trout.
Yeah.
he said that's the reason it's so high on the list, because it's multi-species, and what it does to fish is I was like, that's really cool, to be listed that high, especially, at that time was back 15 years ago. We were only out probably about 10 years at that time. And so that bait right there, I would always have one of these in your boat. This is the lifesaver for a kid in your boat one day.
Yep.
You go up to the bank, put it underneath the float, bump, 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 catch a bunch of brim, and the day is saved, whenever you can't catch anything else.
Well, before we close her out, anything on the horizon that you
We got a bunch of stuff, and one of which is with Russ here. We've got a new idea with him that we're really excited about.
I can't wait.
Yeah, and we'll have a Russ Bailey kit with this stuff as well. So I'm excited about that. A small profile bait, but something with a little bit different look to it. So we won't say too much, or we'll get inundated. Especially in my office, the girls will be like, "When's it coming out?" So we can't. We're not going to do that, but it will be soon, and it'll be a Russ Bailey version for sure, because he's been pushing us towards this size, and I think it's a northern size type bait.
It is.
And so we're excited about that. We also have, a bunch of little things that we're doing with our baits. The fin spin in particular has got a really neat venture coming out. I'm really excited about it. And that bait has got I think will become one of our larger brands within itself too, because it's so unique, and it lends itself to go with anybody's plastic. And so we got 2 new products coming out in the fin spin line that I'm really excited about. One, I can tell you what one is for sure, because it's going to be hitting the market here in the next probably month or so or less. And it's called the Blood Series. And it's a fin spin series with red hooks, red eyes, and different painted jig colors.
Nice.
So it'll be its own series that's coming out, and it looks really sharp. That's one of them. The other one, we're partnering with another company to make a really cool fin spin, and it'll be completely altered. It looks totally different. And so really excited about that. We have, I don't know if it's the best idea I've ever had, but Brian Oldham came to me with what he and Dude do a lot. If you've ever fished with them, they have a jig knocker that they make that slides down your line, knocks the lure off. And I don't know if it's a smart idea or not to get it where people are buying less lures from me, but we have a new lock and knock system. And it basically clips on your line and slides down like a bullet, where all the rest hang off of it and hang up on the limbs. Brian was out fishing a few weeks ago with it. 56 straight times he knocked a jig off.
No kidding.
In deep water.
Didn't break at all.
Didn't lose his lure, didn't lose the lock and knock. And so we're pretty excited about it, because I think when we showed it to the bass world, they want it as well, because their baits are a little bit more expensive, and it's heavy enough that it'll knock a crankbait and everything else off. As long as you're relatively over top of it, or have a good angle at it, the speed of it and the weight of this thing, when it hits it, just knocks it right off the limb. So pretty exciting with it. We have a lot of new colors, on the slab curly in particular. A lot of new colors. If you go to our webpage, you'll see a lot of those, the new colors we have out. But our company is one that, as we see a need to make something myself, then we do it, right?
Yep.
And so a lot of the stuff we're doing is because I like to have it. That lock and knock, man, it doesn't make any sense to sell it, but I want it, and I want it. I have it in my pocket all the time. So especially fishing in a deep lake when they're 10, 20, 30 feet, you hang up that jig in a brush pile, you want to be able to get it out.
Yep.
And so that's one of those new items too that'll be coming out soon. We got a lot on the trout side too. The Trout Magnet's got a lot of new ventures. A new one with the D2 jig company that is a marabou jig that a lot of crappie fishermen are going to want to use too. It's called a Trout Magnet D2. It falls funny, and it's got a really big plume. So when it opens and closes for trout, an absolute killer. Smallmouth and crappie love it too.
Nice.
But it falls fast, so it's got to be something you want a lot of movement to. It's not one of those ones that on a finicky bite you're going to want to use. But yeah, a lot of new stuff.
All right. Well, I'll tell you.
But I got to do one thing though, Russ. I got to do one thing.
Go ahead,
Joe. We got to work on the way Russ says Crappie Magnet.
Oh,
I don't know if it's a northern thing or this Crappie Magnet. Is that what are we saying here? What's the?
How would you like me to say it from here on out?
Listen, you say it however you want as long as you keep catching fish. On this bait right here, the Crappie Magnet or Crappie Magnet, or you can Magnet, you can call it whatever you want as long as we keep catching fish.
Folks, you too should have crappie magnets. Jeff, dude, it's always a good time to see you,
Good
man.
being with you too, Russ.
Hey, I'll tell you what, Jeff, we're going to close out of here. You wanting to get on the water with the guys, aren't you?
You betcha. You know what we always say when we end, right?
What's that?
Surlip them all.
Sore lip them all, baby. And also remember, folks, to help you out, get that BrushPile app. Whether you have a Apple phone or an Android phone, it's completely free. We actually did a video here. We're going to show you, not just talk about the app, we're going to show you all the features. Our podcasts are on there. All of our shows are on there. And the thing that I like, one of the best features for me, is I'm old school. I used to keep a written log every day I went fishing. You can do that right in the app. It saves everything. Jeff, if they see one of our guys that they want to fish with, they can go to our guide section.
Wow, cool.
Call him right from our app.
Really?
Bio, everything's there, man.
Very cool.
So check it out, folks. Hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Stay tuned. We'll be back with another one, and hope you enjoyed it. So long from BrushPile Fishing.